some Christians may say that Jesus, the miracles done by Jesus, the other prophets did their miracles through the power of God. I already stated that Jesus also did his miracles through the power of God in the book of Acts, chapter 2, verse 22. Now God backs it up, and God himself says it when he says in the Bible, supposedly in the book of Acts, chapter 22, verse 22, he says of Jesus Christ, a man chosen by me from amongst the miracles and wonders and signs which I did through him, as you yourselves know. So now you have the statement where Jesus Christ says that whatever he does it and cannot do anything without the power of God. And then God states that whatever miracle Jesus did, I did, God, and used him as the vehicle upon which I, God, performed those miracles. Jesus healed the leopard, but so did Elisha. Book of 2 Kings, chapter 5, verse 14. Jesus fed the multitude, but again, that was done by Elisha or Elijah again. In book of 2 Kings, chapter 4, verse 44. Book of 2 Kings, chapter 4, verse 7. Book of 1 Kings, chapter 17, verse 16. Jesus filled with the Holy Ghost, but so was Barnabas, according to book of Acts, chapter 11, verse 24. Book of Acts, chapter 5, verse 32. Book of Acts, chapter 6, verse 5. 2 Peter 1:21. 2 Timothy 1:14. 1 Corinthians 2:16. Luke 1:41. And we need not go on that any further because I think the point is made. Now, Jesus supposedly, again, if I said that you believe that Jesus Christ is God, therefore you believe that Jesus Christ inspired the text of the Old and New Testament, Jesus Christ misquotes the book that he inspired. Now remember, you say he's God. You say he's God. If this was true, then surely Zakir Naik is God, because Zakir Naik remembers everything in every holy book and by page and verse number, and we don't believe that Zakir Naik is God without it, and Zakir Naik gives all praise to God. So now when you go to the book of John chapter 3 verse 13, it says no man has ascended to heaven. Jesus Christ says that no man has ascended to heaven. That's book of John chapter 3 verse 13. But he must have forgot then about Elijah, who was ascended to heaven and taken to heaven in a whirlwind. 2 Kings chapter 2 verse 11. And he also forgot about Enoch, who was taken up by God without having experienced death and taken up bodily because of his righteousness without ever experiencing death. So apparently the God man Jesus Christ forgot that. Book of Matthew chapter 2 verse 26, he says Abiathar was the high priest during the time of David, but he quoted that wrong. In book of Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 1, chapter 22 verse 22 of the Old Testament, it says it was not Abiathar who was the high priest of that time, but it was his father Ahimelech who was the high priest, and not Abiathar. And I think David was not even king at that time. So Jesus got it very wrong. Remember, the God man. Matthew 23 verse 35, he says that the one who was killed was Zachariah, son of Barachiah. He got that wrong. Again, in 2 Chronicles chapter 24 verse 20, it says that Zachariah was the son of Jehoiada. Again, Jesus gets it wrong. Book of Luke chapter 24 verse 46. Book of Mark chapter 8:31. To suffer and die and rise on the third day. That it is written in the book of the prophets. That is nowhere in the Old Testament. It is nowhere to be found. Nowhere in the Old Testament does it speak of a Messiah dying and rising on the third day, which is why his disciples didn't understand the whole concept of a dead and rising Messiah. That's why they ran when they saw Jesus. Had they understood that to be part of the Old Testament, they would have said, Jesus, how are you? Sit down. Good to see you. But they didn't they? We know the story. One of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not lie. But in the book of John chapter 7 verse 10, Jesus lies. It says not openly, but as it were in secret. Also, we can go into more of this about promises that Jesus Christ makes, and Jesus Christ is portrayed to be a liar. If I have time, I could show you in the Bible where Jesus Christ, for instance, says, he said, my disciples, Had my disciples known that I was of this world, they surely would have fought for me and not allowed me to fall into hands for the Jews, meaning that they knew that he was not of this world. But Jesus, according to that statement, lied. Why? Because he had told Peter before the time, in the book of Matthew, I believe, before the time of prayer, he said, sell whatever you have and buy swords. Peter comes back and reports, basically in the book of Luke, I believe, that he says to Jesus, listen, I bought 2 swords. Jesus says, that is enough, and he goes off to pray. When they go off to pray, the Pharisees and whoever it was, the enemies of Jesus, came to get Jesus. The apostle Peter takes his sword and cuts off the ear of Malchus, the servant of the high priest. So according to that verse right there, and many, many more, Jesus Christ is made out to be a liar. Therefore, he cannot even be a perfect sacrifice because he breaks the commandments. Answering on a question where he says I did not address the book of Colossians and other books where the apostle Paul states. You see, this debate, I thought this debate was about what did Jesus claim. But what my opponent was giving you was all the apostle Paul's claims. You see, this was not the debate. Had the debate been, did Paul claim that Jesus was God, then more than likely I would not stand a chance in this debate. But you see, this is not what this debate is about. It's about, did Jesus claim to be God? And nowhere did he present any verses that accurately state, exegetically, in context, or in any way, shape, or form that Jesus Christ is God. He did not present one. Now, he said that I did not answer those verses about God emptying himself into Jesus, and that Jesus being fully God, and all these verses that he quotes from Paul. If you look at the video, answered that. Go to the example that I made of the bottle. That's all you need to do. When I spoke of the bottle. Okay? And all you have to do is refer to the CD. And I answered all those questions about God emptying himself into Jesus, and Jesus Christ being fully God, and Jesus now having the full nature of God. All those things I answered. And by the way, if all 3 parts of the Trinity and God and Jesus are supposed to be equal, and all 3 are equal, then wouldn't it stand to reason, if the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost are equal from the beginning, that if God the Father emptied himself fully into Jesus, then wouldn't that then, seeing as how they started equally from the beginning, if God emptied himself into Jesus, wouldn't that then make Jesus greater than God? It's a question that you need to ponder. Now, when he speaks about, and in no place did Jesus ever state that he was greater than God. In fact, he said, the Father is greater than I. The Father is greater than all. Of that day knoweth no man. What I do not do of myself, but of the Father that sent me. All authority has been given unto me. These are all verses by Jesus from his mouth, not from Paul, that state that he is not equal to God, but lesser than God, and a servant of God. But now let's deal with his book on his statement on the doubting Thomas, and it's book of John chapter 20 verse 28, where it says, and we'll start at 27. Then he said to Thomas, reach your finger here and look at my hands, and reach your hand here and put it into my side. Do not be unbelieving, but believing. And Thomas answered and said to him, my Lord and my God. So now he tells you that the apostle, or whoever, Thomas, now declares that Jesus Christ is God. He's saying, you are God, you survived death. A little girl on a plane to Morocco where 150 died, she survived death also, but we don't call her God. And so he's stating that Thomas is saying that Jesus Christ is God. That is absolutely not what he's saying. The word is doubting Thomas. He doubted that Jesus was the Messiah, and he doubted that he who was not an eyewitness to the crucifixion, he doubted that that was Jesus Christ standing in front of him, because he took Jesus Christ to be dead. He understood, because he was not an eyewitness, that he thought Jesus Christ was dead, and he did not believe what was in front of him, that this was Jesus, when he believed that he had died. Now, the person, this is written by John, whoever he was. Had John agreed, like I told my opponent, I said, please answer for me this question. I said, if this is what Thomas meant, that Jesus was God, and that's what he was trying to portray, where then in the Gospels, after that, did the disciples preach openly that Jesus Christ was God? Where? He did not answer the question. But even that, we'll go take it further. Just continue reading. Go after verse 28, where Thomas says, and answered him and said to him, my Lord and my God, and read further. Verse 29, and it says, Jesus said to him, Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen, and yet have not and have believed. You see, Thomas seen Jesus Christ many times. You see, what he meant was, did not see the crucifixion, did not see me die, and did not believe that I'm in front of you. This is what he meant. This is what he meant. That you did not see me on the crucifixion, and now you have made a statement that you believe that I am the Christ. Not God, the Christ.